Oh, I got a helper tonight. Hey, you want to do it with me? Hey, everybody. Hey, everybody. All right. I just was making sure you're awake. Welcome back tonight. Thank y'all for being back here again. We got one more night of fun tonight. And then tomorrow night, we got more fun, so come on back tomorrow night. Hey, Maddie. Hey, everybody. What have y'all been learning? What have y'all been learning? Oh, okay, I hear you now. All right. So, what was day one? Light. And what? Yeah. Day 2. Clouds. All right, day 3. Water and land? And trees and plants? Day 4. Sun, moon, and our sun. Day 5. Just fish? Our sea animals and the birds. And then day 6. Land animals, our chicken, wolf, and man. We got Steve. Steve, yeah. All right. That was a little bit of input from some of you all. Thank you. Let's get everybody's input. Let's sing some songs. The B-I-B-L-E, yes, that's the book for me. I stand alone with the word of God. The B-I-B-L-E. Again, the B-I-B-L-E, yes, that's the book for me. I stand alone with the word of God. The B-I-B-L-E. All right. Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so. Little ones to him belong, they are weak, but he is strong. Yes, Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me. The Bible tells me so. I've got the joy, 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 joy down in my heart. Down in my heart. Down in my heart. I've got the joy, 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 joy down in my heart. Down in my heart to say, I've got the love of Jesus down in my heart. Down in my heart. Down in my heart. I've got the love of Jesus down in my heart. Down in my heart to stay. And if the devil doesn't like it, he can sit on attack. Sit on attack. Sit on attack. And if the devil doesn't like it, he can sit on attack. Sit on attack to stay. And I'm so happy, so very happy. I've got the love of Jesus in my heart, down in my heart. I'm so happy, so very happy. I've got the love of Jesus in my heart. Good. All right. Y'all ready to read a little bit? The more you read the Bible, the more you read the Bible, the happier we'll be. We'll learn about Jesus and how we may please him. The more you read the Bible, the happier we'll be. Oh, I got someone sitting down. Y'all didn't sit down yet. We stopped standing up. So you got to stand up. We didn't say Bible again yet. The more you read the Bible, the more you read the Bible, the happier we'll be. We'll learn about Jesus and how we may please him. The more you read the Bible, the happier we'll be. Good job. Some of y'all stood up again. I got you. I'm just kidding. All right, since we're learning about creation, what better than to sing about it? Day one, God made light when there was none. Day one, God made light when there was none. Day two, God made clouds and skies so blue. Day two, God made clouds and skies so blue. Day three, God made flowers and grass and trees. Day three, God made flowers and grass and trees. Day four, sun and moon and stars galore. Day four, sun and moon and stars galore. Day five, God made birds and fish alive. Day five, God made birds and fish alive. Day six, God made animals in that day. Day six, God made animals in that day. Day seven, God rested in his heaven. Day seven, God rested in his heaven. Good job. And then what better that goes along with it is our own creation song. I want to hear it all loud, all right? Hudson, do you want to come up now? Come on up. You got to get a mic. You got the mic. Is this one on? All right. You got that one, I got this one, right? You ready? 1, 2, 3. Days of creation. God made flowers, trees, and land. God in his image created man. Fish and birds and even a cat. Ooh, it's amazing. It's a creation time. All right. Good job, everybody. Let's go to class and learn some stuff. Nursery. Hey, bud. What's up? Yeah, all right. 2 and 3-year-olds. Our pre-K, preschool. Y'all have fun. I like that shirt. All right, kindergarten and first graders. Y'all got a pretty good number tonight. Good job. Second and third graders. Oh, I think y'all grew some too. Pretty good, pretty good. Fourth and fifth grade. You're next. Peace out. That class that just keeps on testing the limits. Junior high. Good number. Thank y'all for coming back. Pack y'all in there. And high school. Sorry, guys. Hey, y'all got a great number 2 again tonight. Good job. Y'all are not going to fit in your class. All right, grown-ups, if y'all want to move on to the middle, you can move to the middle.
It's great to see you all here tonight. We've had a great attendance all week long. And this has been, I told John a while ago, this has been one of the more technical studies Rather than just saying evolution teaches this and the Bible teaches this, this has been digging into the ideas, the reasoning, and the science that has been presented, as well as the pseudoscience that has been presented over the years to try to establish and prove the theory, which really, as we said the other night, is technically not a theory, but the hypothesis of evolution. It was an idea that originated back in the 1800s. There were some precursors to the idea, but it wasn't really formed as the idea of evolution the way we know it today until the 1800s. And since that time, it has been pushed and propagated throughout the world. We've seen it in our country, in our society, but it's been around the world, pushed as an idea. And the reason, why do people want to believe in evolution? What would be the reason behind that? Because they don't want God. And ultimately, what that boils down to is they don't want to be accountable. So what we do, the choices we make, the way we live our lives, the Bible tells us that we're going to answer to God one day. And so there have been people for a long time. In fact, do you know that Charles Darwin was not a scientifically educated man? He became that later. He studied and worked towards some of those things later. But do you know what he was originally educated as? A religious person. His father was a religious leader. And Darwin was raised and brought up and trained in religion until he got to a point where he didn't want it anymore. So he went looking for a different answer. Well, think about the scientific method for just a moment. What does the scientific method involve? It's supposed to involve observation, which causes you to come up with an idea, a hypothesis. And then you continue to observe and record it, report it. And when it's something that is following a same suit over and over, it's repeatable, it's testable, then it becomes a theory. And then as it continues to be repeated and tested, it can eventually become a law. What's a law of science that you're familiar with? Gravity. Newton's laws, okay? Gravity. We're pretty familiar with gravity, aren't we? How familiar are you with gravity? When's the last time you went flying? Right? You get out of bed in the morning, you don't expect to float across the room. You expect to turn and put your feet on the floor. And as you stand up on top of those feet, you expect them to stay on the floor. I remember seeing stuff about the moon and how the gravity there is less. The moon's smaller, doesn't have as much of a pull. And you see the videos of the people who've been on the moon, and they'll walk and jump. And it looks like these guys at the Olympics. So, you know, they're in this big bulky suit. They shouldn't be able to jump more than a couple of feet, but they'll jump several feet in the air and go quite a ways before they touch down again. It's still gravity. It's just less gravity because they're on less of a mass. So gravity, it's a law. If I drop this, I'm not going to because it'll break apart and won't work again. That'll be my fortune, right? But if I drop it, everybody in here, all the way down to the ones who can talk and understand anything, we know which way it's going, don't we? Nobody assumes that if I let go, it's going to go up. Gravity has been observed, tested, we've seen it, we've lived it. It's a law. But evolution is not. Evolution is not even a scientific theory. It's a hypothesis that has been propagated for a long time. And this series of studies does a great job of actually digging into it instead of just saying, well, the Bible says this and evolution says this. We're actually digging into some things. And tonight, to finish off this study, we're going to be looking at the ideas behind human evolution. We've already been looking at the idea of cosmic evolution. How did everything come about? How did everything come into existence? The universe itself, all the way down to the earth and the moon and the things that affect us so much that we recognize affect us on a regular basis. How did it come into being? But we've also then gone on and looked at some other facets of evolution. Last night you were looking at animal evolution, and tonight we're going to take that a little bit further and look at human evolution. Human evolution is not like I said, not a brand new idea. It's been around for a couple of hundred years, but it's an idea that has not had any scientific backing whatsoever. I mentioned the other night, Lance mentioned it again too, the missing link. We're not missing a link, we're missing a whole chain. We're missing everything that's supposed to be there according to what evolutionists say about the fossil record. I'm going to try to be careful tonight to say evolutionists and not scientists, because there's a difference. There are scientists who are evolutionists, and there are scientists who are creationists. And many evolutionists, by the way, do you think the idea of evolution is exactly today what it was in the 1800s when Darwin and some others of his time kind of formulated that idea? It's not even close. Do you know why it's not even close? Because so many facets of it have been proven wrong over the years that they've had to keep adapting it, keep changing it, keep adding things or detracting things from it, because it's not provable, it's not observable. You can't see it, you can't find it, and trust me, they've been looking for it. They've had this idea, and that's something that has been done relentlessly since the idea of evolution took hold, is they have been looking for evidence to support it. Question: according to the scientific method, if you have a preconceived conclusion and you go looking for evidence to support it, guess what you're going to find? You're going to find things that you think support it. And that goes contrary to the scientific method. The idea of having an idea and then looking for something to support it, well, you're going to find things that you think support it, and that's what has happened a lot over the years, and then it gets proven wrong. And so one of the things that has helped so much in proving many of these things wrong is the advancements in science, in scientific inquiry, looking into DNA, things that before they'd see a bone and say, well, this has to be a human bone. And they'd study the DNA later as we've learned more and more about these things, and they prove it's not even a human bone they're dealing with. We'll look at some of that as we go through this. The fossil record has been extremely important in helping scientists to disprove the idea of evolution. Scientists who have been honest have said these things are not supporting evolution whatsoever. Evolutionary theory would say, idea would say, that if evolution is true the way it's been presented, then in our fossils, in the digging that we do in this earth, we should find not only the old animals that have gone extinct, we should find current animals that have been around for a long time, and we should find intermediate animals that show a change from one kind to another. Do you know how many intermediate animal fossils have been collected over the years? 0. Now, if you go to a museum of natural history somewhere, there's one in Anniston, Alabama, Washington, D.C., the Smithsonian. You can go to some big museums. You go to England, Great Britain, and you're going to find natural history museums, and you will find different displays in some of those museums that show what are supposed to be intermediate fossils. And every one of them is made up. They are hoaxes, lies. And they've come up with them and made them so that they can keep perpetuating the lie. It hasn't been proved. They don't have any evidence. So they keep building, they keep making it up, they keep pressing it, and the fossil record just keeps proving evolution wrong. When we think about some of the evidences that they claim have been given, these evidences are all shown to either be inadequate, erroneous, or irrelevant. They just don't prove what they say they prove. Inadequate. Let's look at a few things of inadequate evidences. According to evolutionists, not Bible people, not Christian people who are arguing against it, but evolutionary scientists who study these things a lot. You've got geneticists, you've got paleontologists, you've got paleoanthropologists, you've got people who've got many degrees, many letters that come after their name, who have studied in these areas for decades. And they've done a lot of research into these things, and they are telling us that the fossil evidence is a problem, the lack of fossil evidence. The origin of our genus, Homo, is one of the biggest mysteries facing scholars of human evolution. Based on the meager evidence available, scientists have, you see that next word? Do you know what that word means? They have assumed. They have guessed. Now, understandably, when you've got somebody who is very learned and experienced in a field, their guesses, we may call them educated guesses. But there's a reason we still call it an educated guess and not a fact. Because an educated guess is still a guess. An assumption that's guided by a lot of learning is still an assumption. So they may be able to come up with some better guesses than I would, because I haven't studied those things the way they have. But just because their guess sounds better doesn't make it right. Now this comes from a scientist. This quote is actually coming from a paleontologist. And they rely on a few isolated bones. You go into one of those natural history museums and you see a dinosaur on display. You need to read and research where they found that dinosaur, because they didn't. Do you know how many intact dinosaur fossils they have dug up out of the earth? There have been a few. Very, very few. Most of the time, they find a bone, a scale, a feather that has been fossilized. And from that one bone, that one scale, that one feather, they will postulate, they will give an educated guess on what the rest of that creature must have looked like. And then they will use something very similar to what some of you may have in your house, a 3D printer. And they'll rig it all up and set up all the equations for it, and they'll hit print, and it will print out what looks like a skeleton of a creature based off of one little thing they found. DNA studies have come along, and now they go and look at those things and realize, okay, we've got this bone that we found on one continent and another bone that we found on a different continent, and we put them together and said these had to come from the same creature. And they study DNA later as they learn to do that and realize it's two completely different creatures. Not even the same thing. But they've already built the idea and pushed the idea, and now they don't want to take it back. Sometimes they will print a retraction, but you know how that goes. When they print a discovery, it's on the headlines. When they print the retraction, it's on page 50 at the bottom in small print. They're not going to take it back the same way they put it out there, because they've got an agenda. And the agenda is, at all cost, to push this idea that people are graduates of animals. And it's just simply not provable in a scientific way. We read these quotes. For decades, paleoanthropologists have combed remote corners of Africa on hand and knee for fossils of Homo's earliest representatives. Their efforts have brought only modest gains. A jawbone here and handful of teeth there. Most of the recovered fossils instead belong to either ancestral Australopithecines or later members of Homo creatures too advanced to illuminate the order in which our distinctive traits arose. With so little to go on, the origin of our genus has remained as mysterious as ever. They found a lot of pieces, little pieces, here and there. They have assumed and postulated over the years that the evidence of the fossil record shows that humankind originated, their ancestors of humanity were in Africa. So they have combed Africa looking for a fossilized human or a fossilized precursor to humans. And you know how many they found? Intact human skeleton, fossilized? 0. And also 0 of anything that was in between. 0. Now, if you listen to the books, the textbooks, if you go to the museums, if you listen to the literature that's put out, they make it sound like they've got an abundance of evidence. They have 0 evidence to be able to conclusively prove that these are humans and these are pre-humans and these are the graduated apes, and 0. And they, when they're being honest, they admit it. Mariette de Christina. Pieces of our ancient forebears generally are hard to come by. Okay, somebody translate that for me. We can't find them. That's real educated way of hiding the statement. We can't find any. They're generally hard to come by. Somebody needs to raise their hand right then and say, okay, show us one. One. Yeah, we're not asking for a whole museum full. Show us one real piece of evidence. They're generally hard to come by. We can't find any. Scientists working to interpret our evolution often have had to make do with studying a fossil toe bone here or a jaw there that in years gone by, they couldn't even prove whether it was human or not. Now they can. They can actually break down and study the DNA of the fossils. To a degree, it's fossilized. It's not a recently deceased animal that has tissue and bones like they have right now. They're having to deal with fossilized things, but they can, to a degree, study the DNA. And they can now prove what they're looking at. Part of a face here, a jawbone fragment there, just a few fragments, rather than complete skeletons. And the ones that they have assembled and put forward as the in-between for apes and humanity, very often are a piece found over here and a piece found. Think of the United States. It's like finding a piece in Wyoming and another piece in Texas and saying, well, obviously these go together. Because that would be my assumption. If I find things hundreds or thousands of miles apart, that they obviously should fit together. It's like taking 20 different jigsaw puzzles, putting them all into a pile together, stirring it all up, and just randomly picking up 2 pieces and saying, well, these got to go together. They got to work. And listen, what they're talking about is more impossible than that. You might actually find 2 puzzle pieces that go together, accidentally. You're not going to find what they're looking for. You can search, and they have been, but they're just kind of hard to come by. The fossils that decorate our family tree are so scarce that there are still more scientists than specimens. Get that? There's more people looking for them than what they have actually found, and we're talking about fragments. We're not talking about skeletons, fragments. There's more scientists than there are fragments. Listen to the last part of this. The remarkable fact is that all the physical evidence we have for human evolution can still be placed with room to spare inside a single coffin. And that's things that they have deemed are evidence for human evolution. Fragments that they have found and said, well, this has to be off of a creature that's in between apes and humans. A single coffin. After 200 plus years of digging and looking and searching, they're kind of hard to come by. We're not finding them. Lee Berger, a paleoanthropologist, he does this and has done this for a long time, said we really need a better record. And it's out there.
I got a comment. I admire his optimism, because what he's getting at is just so bleak.
Yes.
He's looking to prove that our God does not exist.
Yes.
How do you work to get that kind of optimism or something like that? I don't know.
I don't.
Especially with his background when he okay, I know it's out there.
Yes.
How many years did he look for it?
Yes. And the same question is turned around on us. How can you believe in a God that you can't see? Well, there's evidence. There's a lot of evidence that God exists. How much evidence have you found in evolution? It's out there. Kind of hard to come by. Yeah, it is hard to come by. Something that hasn't happened, you're not going to be able to prove it. There are some evidences that have been presented over the years. Evidences. It's kind of funny to see erroneous evidences. If it's erroneous, it can't be evidence, right? That's a misnomer. What do you call it? An oxymoron. Yeah, like military intelligence, right? Erroneous evidence. This same Lee Berger we were mentioning just a moment ago, one can no longer assign isolated bones to a genus. A genus is a family. Okay? We've got species, and then you've got a genus or a family, like dogs. We'll look at that a little bit later. You got wolves and coyotes and dingoes, and then you've got all the dogs, different species of dogs, but they all come under one genus, one family. They're all canine, okay? Many different breeds of horses, different species of horses, but they're all equine. Many different breeds of cattle, but they're all bovine. There's a family, and then there are the individual species within the family. We're going to look at this a little bit later. It becomes important in the discussion. He says you can't find a single bone somewhere and immediately just say this has to belong to this family. He's not even talking about a single species. He's talking about a family that may have a number of species within it. He says you can't just pick up a bone and say this belongs to this family. Java Man. Y'all ever read about Java Man? Maybe back in school. Have a picture in the science textbooks, and not only a picture of a few bones that they found, but also a picture showing upright, kind of bent over, but upright, maybe extra hairy individuals in a setting, like around a campfire or in a cave, things like. They have not only said these bones have to be this kind of being, but here's how they lived. Can scientists, if you find somebody who is recently passed, can scientists study their bones and their muscles and their organs and tell some things about how they lived? Yes. For how long? How long ago could that person have died and you still do that? How long before you're dealing with just sinew and bones and cartilage? How long before the sinew and cartilage are gone and you've just got bones? And how long before those bones have petrified or something to where now you can only learn a little bit from them? But they will dig up a fossilized bone and say, we can determine just from looking, this is before they learned how to study DNA like we know now, we can just look at this bone and we can tell that it's this bone of this type creature, and this is how they stood and walked or swam, or how they fed, how they ate, how they slept. There's a whole lot of guessing going on. Java Man. a supposed human ancestor later found to have been erroneously based on the skull cap of a gibbon, which is a type of ape, skull cap of a gibbon, and fossilized teeth and thigh bone of one of us. Okay, they would say one of us, one of who we are now, who we've become all the way to this point. Do you know when they realized this was false? Back in the 1920s. You may find it still in some textbooks, showing that this is one of the middle people between apes and humanity. Piltdown Man was in all the news and in all the textbooks for a long time. An alleged human evolutionary ancestor later found to be a forgery using a modified orangutan jawbone and a portion of a modern human skull. Notice how it's pictured there. When they picture it and set it forth in a museum, it's all intact and they make it look real. But listen to what it said, a modified orangutan jawbone. So they found a portion of a modern human skull, not even the whole modern human skull, but a portion of it. They built the rest of it falsely. They built it, and then they falsified the jawbone to make it attach and look right. So you could have a modern-looking human skull with an ape-looking jawbone. This is what's called a lie, a fraud. Some of these things were accidental. Like the first one, Java Man, they found those and they thought that's what they found. They learned later that it was wrong. But we don't know that they were lying. The people that did Piltdown Man were perpetuating a fraud, a lie, just to prove something that they know they can't prove. They convinced a lot of people. Nebraska Man, an alleged human ancestor based on a single tooth. Later, they discovered, through further study, it wasn't even human. It was from a pig. Do you know that today, if you pull all of a human's teeth out of their skull and you pull all the teeth out of a pig's skull, they look a lot alike? I wonder why. Why would human teeth and pig teeth look a lot alike? Well, yeah, common designer.
And we don't like to think about it, but we eat a lot of the same things.
Bingo. Why would God create pigs with teeth that look a lot like ours? They eat a lot of the same kind of stuff that we do. They chew the same way. They break things down the same way. Do you know birds don't have teeth? So how do birds chew their food? They do, just not the way we think of it. We have teeth that breaks our food down to smaller pieces before we swallow it, and then we've got acid and things in our stomach that break it down even further. A bird swallows its food whole. But do you know what a bird has that we don't? A gizzard that has natural stones with it, but they also sometimes will eat stones, and it goes to their gizzard. And when their food they swallow whole gets to the gizzard, those stones break it down, working very much like our teeth. Bird would look kind of funny trying to be aerodynamic, flying through the air with a grill full of teeth, wouldn't he? So what are you seeing? You're seeing design. You're not seeing things that are the same, but they end up performing the same function. Design, intelligence, not accident, not chance. Pig's teeth, Flipper Man, the collarbone of a chimpanzee that's different than the collarbone of a human. They found this bone and they said, oh, here's the link. Here's a bone from something that was between apes and humans. Well, they found out it was a fossilized rib of a dolphin. It wasn't ape or human. Wasn't related to either one. Even in their thinking, Orc Man. They found a skull cap and said, this has got to be because it's different than human, but it's close in its makeup and density, and so it's got to be one of these intermediate people. No, it was the skull cap of a donkey. There's jokes there, I know. I want to make them. I want to make the jokes. I struggle. Java man number 2. Before they proved the first Java man was not really a man or any kind of ancestor of humanity, they came up with another one and said, here we go, here's the second Java man. By the time they printed the retraction for the first one, they were learning about the second one too and realized that they thought this was a top of a head cranium. It was an elephant's kneecap. Yeah. Further DNA has done a lot of damage to things that were honest mistakes as well as things that were frauds, forgeries. Southwestern Colorado man, in the same Java Man 2 retraction, when they had to write about it and say, okay, we have realized this is an elephant's kneecap, the Alice, I'm not even going to try to say his last name, of the Smithsonian Institute noted that the Southwestern Colorado man lately deduced from a set of Eocene teeth was a myth, the teeth having proved to be those of an antique horse. Now, I haven't seen a horse smile lately, but their teeth don't even look a whole lot like ours. Usually quite a bit larger, different shape to some of them. Enough similarity, they said it's got to be close to human. No, not even close. The Calaveras man, this was found, a discovery of a skull. It was down in a mine shaft, and when they found this skull, they said, we have done it. And they dated it with the latest scientific dating to over 1 million years old. And they said, this has got to be not only the oldest, but therefore the most ancient of the human ancestors. And they found out some of the miners were playing a trick and had put it down there. And when they dated it again, it only dated to about 1,000 years old. 1 million years to 1,000 years. And they wonder why people don't trust their dating methods. Michael Shermer, hoaxes like Piltdown Man and honest mistakes like Nebraska Man, Calaveras Man, they're going to be exposed. The more we learn, the more we can break these things down and study the DNA and what's really involved here, it just makes sense. They're going to be exposed. And it was not creationists who exposed these errors. They didn't go find scientists who believed in God to disprove these things. It was just more scientists. Many of them were evolutionists, but they were honest. And when they looked at it further and said, this cannot be the proof that we think it is, they reported it. And we can appreciate that some of them were honest and said, this is not proof for what we've been saying for a long time. Then there are irrelevant evidences. The species that are not yet acknowledged to be hoaxes. I know that's little print. It's a whole bunch of Homo erectus, Homo neanderthalensis, all the way down to the Australopithecus. For years, they have said the Homo species and the Australopithecine species are related. The more they've learned, the more breakdown they've done, they've recognized that they are not the same at all. They cannot be equated to be relatives. So your evolutionary scientists who have been honest about this have said, we can't put them in the same family. We have to acknowledge that one of these is dealing with humanity and one of them is dealing with an animal. They're not the same. They're not tied to each other, and we can't even say that one came from the other. There's too many differences, too many distinctions. Now this gets technical, okay? Baraminology is the way that creation-believing scientists classify the animals in the families, okay? Baraminology. Now, you need to remember that because it's going to come up a lot in life. The evolutionary classification is cladistics. Now, the difference in those two things, let's simplify it a little bit. The evolutionary idea is when we're looking at things, We need to find the similarities because everything comes from a common ancestor. So they're only looking for similarities. The creation scientist is looking for similarities and distinctions. Okay, that's all this is talking about. One of them is only looking for similarities to say we're all related in our ancestry. The other one is looking at not only similarities, but distinctions, differences, to say some of these can't be related because there are far too many differences. Okay, that's all that the discussion is. And the idea, I said we'd get back to the species, the family, the genus, and things. When you're reading in Genesis about God created things and created them to reproduce after their kind. When you read about the flood and about the animals being brought to Noah, 2 of every kind, they want to relate that to species. Like 2 Labradors, 2 St. Bernards, 2 Chihuahuas, no. The word kind is much more related to family, to genus. 2 dogs. One. Well, and that's the argument that's made from this idea, is that if you had to have 2 of every species of dog that's on the planet, by the way, we've got species of dogs that are here today that weren't here in the flood. We've got species of dogs today that weren't here when I was a kid. Okay? When I was a kid, you didn't see some of the dogs that we see now. They did not exist. They have been bred into existence. Okay? But it was still dogs doing the breeding. They didn't use cats to breed new dogs. They didn't use giraffes to breed new dogs. They used dogs and changed breeding and did things with them to bring about different kinds of dogs. But they're still dogs. They're all still canine. And if you break down their DNA, they are so closely related that somebody like me wouldn't be able to tell it apart. You'd have to be a scientist who studied the genetics and all of that greatly in order to see the difference between a Chihuahua and a St. Bernard's DNA structures. I wouldn't see that. They would. But they are so close because they are of the same family, the same kind. So there would have been, if there were giraffes before the flood, there were 2 giraffes on the ark. If there were dogs before the flood, there were 2 dogs on the ark. If there were T-Rexes before the flood, there were 2 T-Rexes on the ark. Whatever there was 2 of every kind. And then there were 7 of the clean animals. Tell me what made the distinction between clean and unclean animals before the flood. Judaism wasn't here yet. The laws about what they could eat and not eat were not here yet. Why was there a distinction between clean and unclean? It wasn't about eating. They weren't eating any of them before the flood. After the flood, God told Noah and his family, you can eat any of these animals. Under Judaism, he said you can eat some of these animals. In the New Testament, he says all restrictions are off. You can eat any of these animals. But when they went onto the ark, they weren't eating animals. When Noah gathered up the green food to put on the ark, it was for all of the animals and the people. He gathered up green food, vegetation, for everything living on the ark. It wasn't until after the flood that the eating of animals started. So why did they have clean and unclean animals? Sacrifice. What's the first thing Noah did when they got off the ark? He built an altar and he offered sacrifices. Okay? If you only had 1 male and 1 female that got off the ark and you offered even one of them as sacrifice, look at what you just did. You just extincted a species, a kind, a family, a genus. You just wiped them out. Unless evolution is going to bring about another one. All right, we'll talk about that later. That's the dogs we're talking about. You got foxes, you got wolves, you've got coyotes, jackals, all these different kinds of canines, all these different species, rather, of canines, all in the kind or the genus of canine. Okay? You didn't have to have two of each one of these. You just had to have two canines. And then with genetics and changes over many, many years, not billions or millions of years, but over a few thousand years, you end up with a lot of species of canines. Homo varieties do not equal the Australopithecines. That's what we were talking about a while ago. The Australopithecines were animals. They were not human. They were not in between animals and human. They were animals. And scientists have realized this. They've discovered this. And this Lord Solly Zuckerman, he was a geneticist as well as an anthropologist, concluded that if man did descend from an ape-like ancestor, he did so without leaving any fossil traces of the steps of the transformation. Back to what we read earlier, these examples, these evidences are kind of hard to come by. We can't find them. That's what he's acknowledging too. We can't find them. There's no trace of them. Ashley Montague, the skull form of all Australopithecines shows too many specialized and ape-like characters to be either the direct ancestor of man or of the line that led to man. Now, these are evolutionary scientists who are acknowledging these things don't prove what some are claiming that they prove. They just don't. You can use it and make the lie, or you can be honest and say this, we don't have the evidence. And they're saying we don't have the evidence. Some of these scientists, that's the Smithsonian in Washington, again, a lot of different things that have been proven to be wrong, to be false, to be a lie or a fraud. And what they're left with is nothing. They're not left with some instead of a bunch. They're left with none. Even with the lies and just the errors, when they were honest but wrong, even when they pile all of that together, it's just a little bit of evidence. And when you see what was wrong and see what the lies are, they're left with nothing. Macroevolution is not the same thing as microevolution. One of the assumptions that is made, they will say, you have to believe in microevolution. And anybody who knows anything about it, who's honest, says, yes, I believe in small changes. We've seen that. Historically, it's recorded. We see small changes. The beaks of finches, the way they eat, how they get their food, how they get their water, where they choose to nest and live. We see small changes, but they're still finches. They're not just still birds. Finches did not produce condors. Okay? Didn't happen. They're still not just birds, they're still the same species of birds. So when Darwin studied them and said, we see small changes, therefore there must be big changes. No, they're not the same thing. One has to do with adaptation and survival. The other has to do with a falsehood, a lie. Are there other evidences? Are there other things besides these things they've already come up with that they use to try to prove that evolution took place, that humans evolved from animals? How many of you have read this or heard about vestigial organs? What they call vestigial organs is the idea that there are organs that we don't need anymore, but they have not evolved out of us yet. And so we still have them, but they don't do anything. They're just useless. And their assumption then is eventually humans will be born that don't have those organs because they don't serve any purpose. Well, some of the organs that they have said are vestigial are wisdom teeth, tonsils, the coccyx, the appendix, parathyroid, hair. And there's a list further. There's more things. But do you know, over more recent years, we have discovered function in things that for a long time they didn't understand. Wisdom teeth. Do you know what wisdom teeth are used for? They're not just for extraction when you're about 15 to 18, 20 years old. You know what wisdom teeth are for? The same thing that all your other teeth are for. You had 4 more teeth for chewing. Do you know why we remove wisdom teeth so quickly? And why there may be some people today who are born with only 3 or 2? My mom was born with none. People who study this, who truly study this and give us information, say our diets have changed so much. We have so much processed food in what we eat now that we're not needing them anymore. And so this may be a minor adaptation, a microevolution, that we may get to a point where people are born without wisdom teeth. That doesn't mean they're useless. It means they may be useless to us now because of what we eat. So much more processed food. Think if you had to eat every day meat that you were tearing off the bone, vegetables that you had just picked and you were eating them fresh, you'd eat differently. Your body would have to deal with it differently than eating things that are processed the way we eat them so much today and have for a couple of centuries now. The tonsils. Are the tonsils useless? Do they do nothing? How about when you get sick and you go to the doctor and they look in your mouth and look back there and they say, oh, your tonsils are swollen. I wonder why. If they don't do anything, why are they swollen whenever you get sick? Because they've learned they are collecting and helping you to fight off germs and bacteria. Okay? They're not useless. They perform a function. Can you live without them? Yes. You can live without an arm too, or both of them. You can live without both arms and both legs. You're going to have trouble getting around and doing things for yourself, but you can live without them. So why don't we just start developing and birthing children that don't have arms and legs? We don't have to have them. Well, somebody does, or you can't get from point A to point B. Okay? You can't feed yourself. You can't scratch an itch. You can't brush your hair. What would happen to you without arms and legs? Well, you can live without tonsils. Many people do. If they get infected enough times, bad enough, they'll remove them. You can live without your coccyx. Do you know what the coccyx is? It's that little bitty end of your spine. We've referred to it many times as the tailbone. You know why we refer to it as a tailbone? Because of evolutionary teaching. They have taught us that that's the vestigial residual where we used to have tails. Imagine that. They don't even have tails, the ones that we supposedly came from, but we had tails at some point, and now no, it's not. Every great once in a while, there will be a human being born that has an extra growth back there at the end of their spine. And they'll say, oh, there it is. Proof. This one didn't develop like everybody else did, and they've still got a little bit of a tail. It's not a tail. It's extra growth. And do you know what they generally do with it? If it's not protruding very much, if it's not a problem, they just leave it alone. If it's a problem, they cut it off. Okay? But it's not a separate organ. Are there people born with other growths on their body sometimes that aren't supposed to be there? And do you know what we call that? A mutation. A problem. If it can be removed, they remove it. If it doesn't need to be removed, they may not. The coccyx is a small set of bones at the end of your spine, and it performs a function. There are actually leaders, muscles that attach to that, and if you ever fall right on your tail, on your backside, what do you have back there that helps you? Well, you've got padding, right? You've got built-in padding, and you've actually got a built-in shock absorber for the bottom of your spine. It's called the coccyx. It helps absorb impact so the rest of your spine that impacts your entire body is not harmed as easily. Okay? It's not accidental and it's not leftover. It's design. The appendix. What does the appendix do? It works with your immune system, especially when you're young. Hey, you get a little bit older, you have appendicitis, they can remove it, you can live without it. Even as a child, you can live without it. But what you'll be living without is something, especially when you're young, that helps your immune system. They know that it works with the immune system. They've studied it and learned it. For many years, they didn't know that. We learn more as we go along. The parathyroid regulates your calcium intake. Do you know what in your body needs calcium? Bones. But it doesn't just need an abundance of it all the time. If you get an abundance of calcium all the time, guess what happens? You get kidney stones. You have other health problems. So you need something that helps regulate that to get enough and discard what you don't need. Your parathyroid helps with that. Hair. Do you know what hair does for you that it doesn't do for me? It helps keep you warm in the wintertime. It actually helps keep the sun off of your skin directly in the summertime. When you're not wearing a hat and trying to stay warm, you take it, it helps keep the sun off of you. But most people's hair doesn't just lay flat on their head unless you make it. It actually stands up. Do you know why? You know what function that performs? It lets heat out. It lets your skin breathe. It lets air move through it. And do you know what else hair does on your body? It helps to filter a little bit. But somebody who's got more hair than others, if something gets on you that's not supposed to be on you, your hair helps you feel it. An insect, a tiny insect that's hard to see, can get on your skin and you can look and not see it, but you can feel it. And typically what you're feeling is you're feeling them moving against the hair follicles. Your hair helps with safety, protection. It's not useless. Sometimes it's absent, but it's not useless. It performs a function, several functions for your body. So these things have been proven false for quite a while now. A long time they didn't understand what all of these things did. We're learning more all the time. Not only do they talk about organs that are vestigial, that are just excessive and we don't need them, they don't do anything, they're just left over. They also talk about junk in our DNA. Same kind of thing. Things that we don't have and use anymore, but the leftover genes are there in our DNA, and that supposedly these things are eventually going to weed themselves out by evolution. Well, again, studies have shown over the years that this is not junk. It's not just leftover stuff. It just performs functions that they didn't understand for a long time. Okay? The more we learn, the old adage, knowledge is power. It is. When it's truth, when it's the right knowledge, when it's what should be revealed, it always helps. Whether we like it or not, it's good for us to know the truth.
I was going to say that when I was in school, we were taught that our little toe was going to be useless and eventually work its way on. And then later on, they kind of realized that we actually do use that for balance.
Yes.
So they kind of got off of that deal. I hadn't heard anything about it lately, but
That's
that was
right.
the big thing when I was in school. It was going to be useless. We're going to be inbred without them.
I knew a fella that when he was just out of high school was push mowing in his yard, and he was wearing flip-flops pushing a mower. Bad idea. He slipped on some wet grass and his foot went up under the mower and he lost his little toe and parts of the next couple of toes. They were gone. He had to learn to walk again. He had to heal up. Once he healed up, he had to learn to walk again. Because when he would put his foot down, he tilted. He'd been walking for 18, 19 years. But when he put his foot down, he tilted. Because something wasn't there that used to support and balance him. He had to learn to walk again. He did. But I can tell you something about him. He will never again walk normally. Because he's missing something that's supposed to be there. Jonathan Wells, the arguments rest on the premise that most non-protein coding DNA is junk. without any significant biological function. Again, they assumed things. They learned a little bit, enough to see the DNA, and then they made assumptions based on what they knew at the time. And what we've learned later is there's not any DNA in our strands that are junk, that are just doing nothing. It all has a function. And so they've done away with this idea completely. Now, this is a pretty deep idea. You'd have to dig into it, and I've read some about it. I understand a little bit about it, but understanding a little bit don't make it easy to teach it, okay? They're saying if you take a long strand of chimpanzee DNA and a long strand of human DNA, anybody know how many chromosomes we have in our DNA? We have 46, which makes 23 pairs, okay? You're right, 23 pairs. A chimpanzee has 48, which makes 24 pairs. And when they lay them down, there's a lot of similarity. And so they say, we're only 2 genes, 1 pair away from being chimpanzees. So we have to be related to them. If you break down the genetics in a DNA strand, you're going to find that there are 4 bases. Think of houses sitting on 4 foundations. And there's only been 4 house plans ever made. Okay? So every house in the world is on one of those 4 bases, foundations. Every living thing that has DNA has those 4 bases for their genes in their DNA. A, G, C, and T. Therefore, if you take a genetic strand of a human and a genetic strand of a daffodil and you examine them closely, statistically, they're going to match up 25% of the time. Does that mean then that we came from daffodils? Evolutionary scientists don't even think that. But they say that humans and by the way, that this whole thing about chromosome fusion, one of the differences is there's one place in the DNA strand where it looks like you've got 2 genes from a chimpanzee, and in the same spot on the human DNA, it looks like they have fused together. So they talk about chromosome fusion, and that's one of the things that made us distinct or different from the chimpanzees. Well, I agree, it's something that makes us different. It doesn't mean that one of theirs fused together to make one of ours. They're completely different. They have tried to fuse them, and they can't make it happen. I wonder why. Similarities. Have you ever heard someone say before that humans and chimpanzees are 98% alike genetically? I heard somebody make a joke about it years ago. Somebody was really giving them down the road, and they said, well, you're only 2 genes away from throwing feces. You're that close to being a chimpanzee. No. In reality, human DNA and chimpanzee DNA are about 80% similar, not 98%, about 80%. Now, when you start thinking about the similarities between chimpanzees and humans, the way we move, the things we eat, the environment in which we live. We're both mammals. We're born of a mother, just like chimpanzees are. We learn to move, to walk, to crawl and walk. And we eat similar foods, vegetables, fruits. Not everything the same, but similar. And we do a lot of similar things. We have hands, we have eyes, we have ears, we have a mouth and a tongue and teeth and legs and a spine and a lot of similarities. By the way, all cats have those same similarities. All dogs have those same similarities. It's shaped a little different. They may move a little, but there's a lot of similarities. Okay? It's not a 98% thing. One of the scientists that was studying this was talking about the difference in qualitative instead of quantitative. You can't just look at the numbers. You have to look at the things themselves as to their quality. What makes them exactly what they are? And when you look at quality versus quantity, the differences really stand out. But again, remember the difference of approach. We're not even going to mention the words because I can't say them again. I have to back up to them. But the difference between the approach of evolutionary thinking versus creation thinking is that one of them is only looking for similarities and the other one is looking for similarities and differences. You have to consider the differences. You can't just look at the similarities. We may have 80% similarity DNA-wise, genetics-wise, with chimpanzees. But we've got at least 25% similarity with a daffodil. So those numbers, talking about the quantities, do not add up to the argument that many think they do. Yes. Somebody gets a new heart valve, and they use a pig heart valve. Here not too long ago, I can't remember now what organ it was, but somebody received an organ from a pig, an entire organ. Yes.
So that they could be born and you not be able to reject, for example, a kidney.
That's right.
They've already tested kidneys in people that were on life support died. They kept them alive long enough to do a transplant to determine the viability of that and actually found that it will work.
Yes.
But they haven't got approval yet that they do it. But there are things they are advancing in.
That's right. And why can they do that? Because if you break down the DNA and look at a pig and a human, we've got a lot of similarities. Does that prove that we somewhere along the line came from pigs? Or does that much more prove that the Creator who designed pigs and humans made us a lot alike and a lot different? Okay? So you have to look at different things. He said the idea of taking a DNA strand of a chimpanzee and a DNA strand of a human and lining them up and saying, oh, look how similar they are, would be the same thing as taking two lines of humans, male, female, red, yellow, black, and white, just line them all up and say, well, they're all humans, so they must be exactly alike. But some are tall and some are short. Some are fat and some are thin. Some have blue eyes, some have green eyes, some have brown eyes, some have hazel eyes. They have different colors of hair. We got a lot of differences. Some have hair. Yeah. It would be the same thing as putting a bunch of different people in two lines and saying everything is exactly the same. Well, no, there's a whole lot of similarity, but there are also some distinctions, even among humanity. And if we can see those distinctions and know that if you get two people with blue eyes who get married and have children, or a redhead and a brunette who get married and have children, and you know what happens there, you can talk about the traits that will come in that line. Why? Because you've understood, you've studied, you've observed how the differences work together. But the fact is, they're both humans. You know what you cannot do? You can't put a chimpanzee and a human together and produce another human. In fact, you can't put them together and produce anything because they don't match up genetically to where that can happen. A horse and a donkey, you can put together and they will have an offspring, a mule. And that mule is sterile and cannot pass on any genetic code. Well, a horse and a donkey are out of the same genus, family. They're not the same species, but they're out of the same family. You can breed a Chihuahua and a Saint Bernard. Not easily. But they're in the same family. You could breed a coyote and a German Shepherd. They're in the same family. Okay? The human chimps' DNA similarity, body structures, physiologies, biochemistries, intended diets, habitats, a lot of things that are similar about apes and humanity. More so than a lot of other animals. So you would expect to find some similarities in the DNA. What you don't ever find are exact matchups. They're not going to happen because there's too many differences. Mitochondrial DNA, again, some of this gets very technical. The idea of this original Eve, obviously they're using the biblical idea that the first woman, Eve, there are DNA things that pass from father and mother to their children, but mitochondrial DNA only passes from the mother to the children. And so they studied some of the changes that we observe in DNA, mutations and things that take place in a couple of generations, from mother to children, from mother to children, from mother to children. And they say, okay, we can see this many changes to here and to here. So if we take that and we back it up and just put that in a calculator, then it has to go back this many years to get to the original mother, the mother that had no mutations, that had the original human DNA. And they postulate that at 180 to 200,000 years ago. I wonder why they postulate it there. Because that fits the evolutionary timetable. That's when they say that modern humanity, people like us, were finally on the scene. All the intermediaries had finally brought about what we call us, modern people. The reality, if you break it down the way that it should be, is that it's somewhere around 10,000 years or less. Not 180 to 200,000 years. Because they don't account for a lot of things that you would have to account for in creation. The problem of determining human evolution is a lot more than just the things we've talked about. Not being able to find fossils, not being able to find skeletons, not being able to have a remarkable fossilized history of things changing from one thing to another. By the way, not just from apes to humans. They've not found any intermediary species of any kind. None whatsoever. Zero. They've not found the change animal between a fish and an amphibian, or from an amphibian to a mammal, or from lower mammals to higher mammals, or from apes to humans. There's none. So I said, they're not talking about a missing link. We're talking about a missing chain. There's no links. Everything they've ever found is its own kind. They've never found an intermediary. But it's a bigger problem than just that. You would have to have animals that produced a human. But not just animals that produced a human, because what does a human need in order to reproduce? Another human. So you would have had animals on the earth who produced a human male, and in the same generation produced a human female. And that couldn't happen, one on Africa and another in Europe. Couldn't happen that, because what's going to happen, they didn't have airplanes and cars and things like, what's going to happen if one of them popped out in Africa and one of them popped out in Europe? They're each going to die alone, not knowing the other one exists, and humanity is foiled. So it would have to happen, according to their own idea, it would have to happen that a male and a female came out in the same generation many, many times. And the numbers just to get one are astronomical. The numbers to get two are compounded exponentially, because it can't just be two, it's got to be a male and a female. And each one of them has to have complete reproductive system. They have to meet. They have to want to reproduce. Yeah. Okay, let's say they're like animals. They've been raised around animals, so they just do what animals do. They'd still have to want to reproduce. They'd have to both be in the same generation. And by the way, what's the youngest age in here? 18? They'd both have to be like you. Because 54? You get a 54. If we live 50 years on the earth before we found each other, guess what's probably not going to happen? Have kids. So they'd have to meet while they're in their childbearing years, while they're relatively young. And they'd have to have children born into a world of animals that they say back at that time was a very harsh, inhospitable environment. We have problems bringing babies into the world sometimes in the most protected and pristine environments. And their children would have to reproduce. And their children would have to reproduce. And they'd all have to survive. The earth is made up of 196,900 square miles. What are the chances, if the numbers are 1 to the, all these zeros, chance for one human being to come out of animals, to have two at the same time, one male and one female, with everything formed so that they could reproduce, if they could even find each other, if they knew to look for each other? Chances aren't great. Why are there no apes birthing humans today? Why, after all these years, 200 plus years that evolution has been posed as an idea, why have not just apes to humans, why have we not seen any intermediate creatures? They should be around us. We should have lots of them. We don't have any. Nobody's ever seen one. Not only never seen one living, we can't find one that died either. Zero evidence. So does this, when you actually look at the science that has been put into, and the false science that's been put into pushing the idea of evolution, does it add up? Does 1 + 1 = 3? It never has. It never will. I love what this study has done, because rather than just taking Bible and opposing evolution, it's actually taking science. Because science is based on evidence, on observation, on things that are seeable, testable, provable. And there's not one area of evolution that has evidence to support it, to prove it to be true. It's not just you can't prove the whole thing, you can't prove any part of it, much less the whole thing. Thank y'all so much. Tommy? That's right. The Scriptures give us an explanation that when we're looking at the true evidence, it supports it. It gives evidence that the Bible is true, instead of proving something that goes completely against the Bible. Evolution is not wrong because it goes against the Bible. Evolution is wrong because it's wrong. Now, it also goes against the Bible. But that's not why it's wrong. It's wrong because it's wrong. It's not provable. You have no evidence.